Hello, my name is Jose Sierra Jr. I'm here with my son Bo Sierra again. Two countries, one lie. How did this start? Today I'm going to give you a segment of kind of an update on how we started, where we've been, and now where are we going. First of all, let's share a couple of things let's get this on the table. When we started this organization was started in Illinois and I brought it to Texas. What happened is the HB 724 House bill that Texas had provided was the main issue. When I had studied that issue about the unclaimed mineral rights, I knew right away that it seemed to be a ruse. It seemed to be Texas was playing a game, but everybody thought it was serious, everybody thought it was real, and everybody thought Texas was going to ante up. Boy, were they wrong. But that's okay. We've been down this road before. So what we did here in Illinois is we started putting our heads together. We started thinking about what are we trying to do? How are we trying to do it? And what we learned is this. We learned that there is a story here that needed to be unfolded. And Bo, could you put the timer on? Make sure I want about 20 minutes. I want to give about a 20-minute conversation here about what this was all about. What we decided to do is that we thought about how do we get people in Texas to unite? How do we get people in Texas to understand the scope and the breadth of this problem? Well, first of all, there is a language barrier in many places. Some parts of South Texas speak almost all Spanish, and others talk Tex-Mex, and some just don't speak Spanish at all. So I started seeing the diversity of within our own organization and within our own group and within South Texas and eventually all of Texas. What we said is we need to bring these people to an understanding of what happened and why it happened, and the end result is where this was all going to go. There's an organization out there of attorneys. And most of you know who they are. Eileen Fowler and the other attorney she has brought in now is taking this case hopefully to a higher level. A lot of people call us and ask us, what about the Eileen Fowler group? What are they doing? Well, we really don't know. Unfortunately, I don't criticize other organizations or other people like Eileen Fowler, because anybody that is fighting Texas or the United States is, in my opinion, doing the right things. Now, I may not agree with how they do it, but I know one thing. Anybody that's fighting Texas or the United States is doing what we need to do. So, with Eileen Fowler and the organization that she has, and the attorney Roth, whatever his name is, I forgot. Morgan Roth. They basically are fighting one issue. And that issue, the way we understand it, and we may be wrong, but this is the way we understand it, is unclaimed mineral rights and the royalties of those unclaimed mineral rights. Unfortunately, there has been chicanery going on in Texas since day one, in my opinion, on how the people in the organization of the state of Texas control the money and the responsibilities they have to make sure that the money falls into the right hands. Well, as you can well see, that hasn't been very well done by the state of Texas. Right now, we understand that Texas is hunkering down because they know that organizations like ours and Eileen Fowler's and others are after them for the injustices and the denial of their royalties or what they believe to be a just settlement from the state of Texas on just the oil mineral rights. Well, what does that do for the rest of us? Well, again, Eileen Fowler's issue is just the mineral rights and also the civil rights that were violated to those mineral rights. So she's got a state and a federal possible lawsuit coming. That's what we understand. But having said that, we look at other organizations and they are after the state of Texas for the injustices. But nobody's going after the United States. But we are. Our focus is the United States, and I'll tell you why. Because the United States is the real culprit in this whole endeavor. They were the ones that perpetrated the fraud in 1941 against our ancestors and our people. Because of what they did, it allowed Texas to do what it's doing. They condoned the action of defrauding our ancestors, and Texas has pretty well done exactly what is expected of them and denied justice to all of our ancestors for not only the mineral rights, but also the civil rights that were violations that are going on right today. Well, two countries, one lie is about more than just that. We are the primary group that is going after the United States because of the land. The United States defrauded us out of our land, and I'll explain to you how. This 20-minute video or so is going to give you a quick rundown of why they did this. If you've been to my presentation, you understand of why the United States had to make this deal with Mexico and used our ancestors as pawns. It was the first time that I know of in history where reparations were given to a group of individuals, and those were your ancestors and mine, and those ancestors were denied the outcome of a treaty by the government that they gave the money to, and that was Mexico. If you don't know what the word reparations is, you can look it up in the dictionary. Reparations, and I'll give you my definition, is to correct a wrongdoing. And that's very obvious, that there was a wrong done to us. What they did in 1941 is they tried to correct the 1923 treaty, because in the 23 treaty, the United States and Mexico agreed to compensate your ancestors and mine in gold coin or equal money to that. And if they didn't get that money in 30 days, they would get their lands back. That's in the 1923 convention. I've showed that in my presentation, and I have the evidence to prove it. But they knew that treaty was wrong when they made it. And they knew that treaty was still good in 1941, and they had to do something to fix it. And what they did by creating the 41 convention was they said that the 23 convention was no longer in play, and that the 41 convention would supersede the 23 convention in any agreements that they had. The word supersede is interesting, because this word supersede in this instance was a cover-up. It was to correct an admission of guilt, and at the same time an admission that they were going to pay in gold coin or give us our land back in 30 days. That's in the treaty. But they knew they hadn't done that, and here it was 1941, and this was the opportunity they had to seal the deal, to bury the 23 convention so nobody would ever bring it up again, by allowing the 41 to supersede the 23 convention. Supersede means to take over and to remove and replace. End of story. So the 41 Convention took into law, and it became the law of the land, and you no longer could cite the 23 Convention to any of the wrongdoing that was done to us, because now the 41 Convention was going to correct it and remedy that. Well, what happened there? Well, as you well know, the 41 Convention, the United States gave $193 million to Mexico. You want to know something? We can prove that. There's evidence that the United States gave Mexico $193 million, but no money exchanged hands. You got to understand what's going on here. Because Mexico owed them money. Now, Mexico owed the United States a lot of money in 1941. So what they said, the United States said, whatever you owed us, then we're going to deduct that from the $193 million, and we are now even with you, and you have to pay all of the Mexican citizens that we did damage to. That was the reparations they were doing. They called us Mexican citizens, but they knew we weren't. But they had to, because the treaty would have been invalid. They couldn't say American citizens, but we were. So now it gets interesting now, because now you've got a convention in 41 that has just been put in place, and you have given the exchange of either debt or monies to Mexico on our behalf, $193 million. And one of the other agreement was that they had to pay the oil companies $40 million. Well, that wasn't a problem, because you see, we erased the debt from Mexico altogether in 1942, just about completely wiped it off clean. So Mexico came out smelling like a rose. I mean, you got to remember, in 1941, $193 million is a lot of money. It's billions today, the equivalent of it is. So that's where the sticking point, and that's what a lot of Tejanos don't understand. It's the sleight of hand. You know, it's like the three-card Monte. We're being played here by two countries that told a big lie. So what do we do about that? What are we going to do about what I just said? We have to get some kind of payment to right the wrong. Isn't that what reparations is? So we go and we ask Mexico for the money. And by the way, Mexico, up until 1970, said they were going to pay us. Can I prove that? Sure can. That's documented. You see, what our evidence really is two lawsuits, one in 1984 and the other one in, 81, and the other one in 1994. The first lawsuit was by the ADR, Asociación de Reclamación, by Amita Zarate, and the second lawsuit was by the Texas Land Grants Alliance, the Alliance of Texas Land Grants of 1994. And both those organizations filed lawsuits to get compensation. The first lawsuit in 1981 was the Amita Zarate, and those lawyers believed that they could sue Mexico in the United States, and they were sadly mistaken. They lost. Their case was thrown out because they told us, if you've got a problem with Mexico, you need to sue them in Mexico. You can't sue them in the United States. Okay, fair enough. They tried. They made a mistake. They tried, and they failed. I told you, I don't bum rap anybody that tries to get justice for our ancestors. So the second lawsuit was more interesting, because they filed claiming that the United States violated the 5th and 14th Amendment, that our descendants or our ancestors' rights were violated. And you want to know something? He was right. That attorney's name was Stephen Schneebly. He's a professor at the University of Miami for law, and he was a graduate of Harvard. He was he graduated cum laude. That's first in his class, I think that's what it means. And he took it all the way as far as he could, and he lost. But he didn't lose because of his point. His point was right on. He was correct that the United States did violate the 5th and 14th Amendment. But what kept him from getting justice for those descendants in 1994 was a technicality of the law. And that technicality of the law is called the statute of limitations. Why did that block us? Because it states in there, in any treaty in the United States that it makes with any government, that the treaty is binding after it's ratified, and you have a clock of 6 years to file an objection or a lawsuit if something was wrongly done in that treaty. If you don't put your objection or file your lawsuit within 6 years, after that 6-year period, it's law. Even though it was wrong, it's done. You can't undo it anymore. That's how the United States hides behind these treaties. That's why they created the term statute of limitations. It originally was created because statute of limitations really did have a purpose at the beginning, but then they figured out how to use it to basically, let's put it this way, overwhelm us, so we weren't able to get justice on things that they did intentionally. And in my opinion, that's exactly what they did. They knew this treaty was a fraud. They knew they were going to get over on these poor descendants, and they knew they were going to get away with it. And they knew that nobody was going to understand it, so they would be able to get away with the 6-year clock of statute of limitations. Especially when they gave the money to Mexico on the citizens of Texas, on their on their behalf. And the United States knew that Mexico had already agreed to pay them. And they had even announced it in a newspaper that the United States had given this money to the Mexicans, and the Mexicans would be paid by Mexico in due time. Well, what happened is they got everybody believing that Mexico was going to dole out the $193 million to everybody. So we were patient enough to wait for it because they kept saying, checks in the mail, we're going to get it to you, we're going to get it to you. So they stalled past that 6-year clock. And that's how they duped us. They knew they could stall us off long enough. Don't forget, in 1941, when they created this treaty, we were at war a month later with Germany, Japan, and Italy. So we had a lot of our ancestors fighting these wars, fighting the very people that are trying to suppress the world, such as Hitler and Mussolini and Hirohito, and fighting for our lives over there. Our ancestors were. I was born in '48, so I don't know anything about World War II other than what I've heard or read or seen in movies. So my point to you is, it was convenient for the United States to do this and get away with it, and they knew it. Now, can I prove that? No, I probably can't prove that there's a letter written that we're going to do a job on these Mexicans and we're going to use them as puppets. There's no such letter like that. So what I had to do was figure out, go back to square one, forget everything I've learned and try to relearn the whole thing over again. And I did just that in the last year and a half. And that's when I discovered that this was a fraud that was perpetrated by the United States to keep Mexico from aligning with Germany, Nazi Germany. And the way they did that is by giving them the money to help them out, to keep them happy so they wouldn't side with Nazi Germany. Because let me tell you something, if you know anything about history, go back to 1938, you'll see that they were leaning to actually align with the Nazis. So you gotta remember the time. So when I saw all these little details and I started putting them together with information that I had read, seen, that I have discovered, I realized that this was a fraud. That we were victims of this fraud. My family, your families, and that it was wrong what was done. Now, having said that, I had to figure out, how do I explain this to somebody? Because they're going to think I'm nuts. Well, some people still do. So what I did is I started compiling information to put it all together, and I created a presentation. Now this is what I wanted to tell you. For those of you who have not seen my presentation, we have the YouTube video out right now, and it's called How the U.S. Changed World War II to Create the Biggest Fraud on Mexican Descendants. Go to the YouTube site, check that video out. It's a long video, it's an hour and a half. You're going to be bored to tears because it's all about facts and the truth. But for those of you that can stand it and understand it, because it's very dry, it's very calculated, and it shows you the real truth of what happened. If you care about your families, you need to check this video out, because this video is important to you. I'm going to tell you why. As of to this date, today we're sitting, what's the date, Bo?
It's the 8th.
May 8th, 2016. As of to this date, we have given that presentation to about maybe 10 locations. Some in New Mexico, most of them in Texas. And I'm going to tell you something. We targeted the smartest people we could, because we sat around and we were trying to figure out, how do we show the Tejano brothers and sisters, how do we get them to understand this case? And one of my son or somebody else said, we need to bring the smartest people in and show it to them and challenge them. And I said, you know what, that's a good idea. So what we did is started showing these to professors of history, professors of Spanish and Mexican land grants. I'm not going to use their names, that's not important, but to understand one thing, a half a dozen people that we went to, those professors, 6 of them or so, these people were very smart. They knew most of the material. But I'm going to tell you what they said. And then you'll get a better understanding of how serious we are about this. I'm at 20 minutes, so I'm going to keep going. About another 5 minutes. What happened is, we gave them the presentation, and we said, this is what really happened. And you want to know something? A few of those professors wanted to challenge us. Because you know why? They didn't believe it. It's hard to believe that the United States would intentionally do this to a generation of Mexican American descendants. But they did. After our presentation, jaws dropped. These professors were blown away. We gave 3 of them, 3 professors in New Mexico and 3 or 4 professors in Texas. And each and every one of them could not believe what they had just witnessed and heard, the evidence we had given them. One of the professors, who is supposed to be the leading authority, again, I respectfully hold his name back because I didn't ask his permission to use his name, so I won't use his name. He's one of the leading authorities on Spanish and Mexican land grants in Texas. He said, Mr. Sierra, this is very disturbing. I said, how so, Professor? He said, you see, If I want to read about the King Ranch in the college or the university that he works in, he says I can go to the library and find 2-3 books and read all I want about the King Ranch. If I want to read books on Tejanos and I want to know a lot of information, I can go to any library and get 4 or 5 books on Tejanos. He says, but what troubles me, Mr. Sierra, the information that you have just exposed, there isn't a book written about what you have discovered. And we said, we know. I said, nobody knows. We're just starting to unveil this now. The real issue here is this has been held secret by the United States government, the Texas government, and no one has told the truth until now. And it was uncovered by Tejanos. Not professors, not lawyers, no one, but just average Tejanos. And I said, we're getting smarter. We're getting smarter and we're figuring this out, and we're going to bring everybody to the table and say, we know the truth. And that day of reckoning is coming. As sure as I'm sitting here, that day of reckoning is right around the corner. And sooner or later, you can't hide the truth. It's going to expose itself. It's going to come out and apart. And I looked at this professor and I said, Professor, he says, I asked him, I said, what do you think of what we just told you? He says, I don't know what to think. He says, you do not understand the magnitude of what you have just uncovered. I said, yeah, we have. He says, this could explode. This could be the biggest fraud in Tejano history that it was ever perpetrated on them by anyone. He says, do you realize that the meeting you're going to have in Texas, it could ignite and explode into a huge movement? We're saying that's exactly what we're trying to do, because it needs to be done. But see, you have to understand, the 6 or 7 professors that we had talked to were just professors. Nothing wrong with that. They're very smart people, very intelligent men. But we needed to go one step further. And we went to talk to the 3 most high-profile attorneys we could find. And we did. We had an attorney out of Florida who was one of the smartest men I've ever talked to. And I'll even tell you his name. I don't think he would mind. Well, I better not. I better hold his name. The second one we talked to was out of Arizona. And it was a woman. She was a specialist in Indian, okay, I'm going brain dead here. Indian treaties. And she was an expert and had gone to state and local courts, maybe even state Supreme Courts. I'm not sure, but I think she had. And won some cases. And we talked to her. And then we talked to a third one, who was out of Washington, D.C., one of the highest profile attorneys we could find. And all 3 of those attorneys, who were high profile attorneys, they're just not regular attorneys, these are constitutional attorneys. All 3 of them agreed on one thing, that there was a crime committed against our people. There was an injustice inflicted on our people because of this treaty in 1941. They all agreed. All 3 of those said that we had proven our case to them, and they were in concert with us, that a violation of our civil rights, the 5th and 14th Amendment, had been done. But all three of them also agreed that we would not be able to get justice for this case. Interesting, isn't it? If we are right and we convince these three attorneys, high-profile attorneys, that we had our civil rights violated, the 5th and 14th Amendments, why wouldn't anyone take our case? Because they said you'll never get past the statute of limitations, which we talked about earlier. The statute of limitations is what the issue is now. So, this meeting coming up in April of next year in 2017 in San Antonio is to bring the smartest people together to have them listen to some people that are going to talk, who are going to give you information on the history and the legal parts of what we're facing, and also to build a strategy on how to get there. Because you see, what these lawyers all agreed on is there's a way around this. Now, if you notice, Two Countries, One Lie has never asked for anybody to sign a document or a contract with us. We are not asking for 10% of your money, 20% of your money, or even 30% of your money, as other people have done to represent you. Now, we're descendants and we are people just like you. And we don't want to give our money away to anybody unless we know we have an issue that has to be dealt with and we can win it. Or that gives us a great chance to win. So we have been reluctant to get money from anyone in Texas for the last year and a half. We have never gone out and solicited contracts that would commit you to give 10, 20, or 30% of a settlement. Why? Because number one, we weren't ready. And number two, it doesn't mean we aren't going to do that, but we want to make sure that we're sure of what we're doing and that we don't take anybody's money for something that is not going to work. And possibly one other element, and that is to make sure that when you get involved with Two Countries, One Lie, you understand fully of what we're trying to do. That's what I have issues with other organizations. They're not clear on what they're trying to do or how they're trying to do it. That's what we are putting these tapes out now, these videos, to show you our strategy of how we can do this. And we're going to do this. Because you see, all three of those attorneys agreed on one thing, that there is a way to put pressure on the United States to bring possibly bring this to a court trial. But it has to be done right to have a chance of happening. Because you see, there's another strategy to this, and we'll get into that at the meeting. But as you can see, I'm trying to build you a picture of what we were facing and what we did to get to this point. Now, I've told you this story in about 25 minutes or 30 minutes, and it's just an indication of clarifying, because of so many questions I'm being asked on what exactly we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is bring this issue to the light. What we're trying to do is get justice and bring this to a negotiated level between the United States and Texas. But we can't do it without your help. How do I mean that? Is this going to take money? Oh, hell yeah, it's going to take money. Because you ain't going to beat the United States or Texas without having some kind of money to be able to show them that you are together, united, and that you will do what it takes to get justice. Right now, they don't see that in any of us. They see fragmented groups. They see little groups over here. They see little groups over there. They see a lone group here. And those are easy because everybody is fragmented. We are saying educate and unite. And that is where our strategy has been from day one. If we do that, then we can put this in a different level. Is that going to take donations? Yeah, it sure is. It's going to take a little bit of money. We've asked for $1 or $2 from each member of a large family. I don't think $1 or $2 from each member of a large family is a lot of money. I mean, like I said, my family and I probably spent $20,000 in the last year and a half, and I don't have any money. We're not rich, but we're trying to do the best we can to bring this issue now that it's out there now. It needs to stay on top of the agenda, and it needs to be dealt with, and we don't want to let this die. So help us. Get out there, come to the meeting. It's $10 advance seating, $15 at the door. 1,000 seats is all this auditorium has. But you're not going to want to miss this meeting, because we're going to have to try to get the smartest people out there so you can ask questions to them. And you can see what they say about what this injustice is and how we can deal with it. Again, I want to thank you very much for allowing this little segment, because I've gotten a lot of questions from a lot of people and they're not clear, and I hope this helped a lot of people clarify what we're trying to do and where we're trying to go. And again, this is Two Countries, One Lie. Thank you very much. Have a great night.